This is why mentorship, coaching, masterminds, all the things are important because you just don't know what you don't know. And a lot of us will spend time being busy because we equate busy with business because our parents were always overwhelmed and busy. And I'd have you consider that busy isn't effective, it's just manic. How do we be effective? How do we set appropriate indicators to let us know that we're on the right track? What can we measure? So if I'm starting anything, well, we have to have a proof of.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. On this episode, I bring in my friend Cody Jefferson with over 2 decades of experience. His coaching and training programs help thousands of men and women achieve life-changing results in their personal growth, relational intimacy, self-fulfillment, family life, leadership skills, and entrepreneurial success. He is the founder of Embrace the Line, a worldwide movement offering one-to-one coaching, group coaching, masterminds, and courses. This is a conversation I believe every entrepreneur and pretty much every person on the planet needs to hear. And we go deep on a lot of different things. You're not going to want to miss this episode. Check it out. Cody, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
It's good to be here, brother. It's good to be here.
Like I was just telling you offline that I got introduced to you. I heard you speak to another group and I was like, man, this guy, we have the beliefs that you have are so in line with what I've been working on and that I've been preaching to my own clients for the past year, that it just connected. I'm like, I got to bring you on because I think you're a pretty elegant speaker. I think what your message will hit with this audience a little bit more than just, sometimes you have to hear it from another person and not just from the same person week after week after week. You got to hear it from another person. So look, for the people who don't know you, why don't you give your 30-minute, I'm just kidding. Why don't you just give a quick little intro to your story and who you are?
Yeah. So if you don't know me, my name is Cody Jefferson. I am Sarah's husband. I am Stetson's father. I am Titus's stepdad. And I am all about the conversation of how do we help good people become great. So for 13 years, I was in occupational ministry in a variety of roles in pastoral leadership. I say occupational ministry because I believe that we're all called to ministry if our values align and our belief system aligns. So I just stepped out of the pulpit and into a different platform. So for the past, 7-ish years, it's been all about the conversation of how do we help founders, CEOs, creatives, artists, people who are feeling called to something more. How do we help them align to that? How do we help them find their unique proposition into not only marketplace, but how do we help them build and cultivate a life that is meaningful, purposeful, and fulfilled without sacrificing their soul on the altar of that success? And so backside of that, I am in a few different companies, occupying a few different roles. I travel, I speak, coach some wrestling. And I'm just a guy from Oklahoma that is doing my best to be a good steward with the gifts I've been given.
I love it. And if you think Cody's just using that line for the podcast, he actually starts his bio exactly how he just started, that he's a husband and father. So it's legit. And I love that. By the way, I actually changed my bio because I heard you do that and I switched that on mine. So totally stole that from you. So if anyone's like, hey, Jason, I love your bio, it came from Cody. Cody rewrote my bio. One thing you said was if they're called, right? Or they feel they're called to something.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. Our consulting business, one of the things we talked about is our slogan, make better businesses and humans.
Yeah.
Because I think we need better humans on the planet and that will help drive better businesses, I believe as well. But one of the things I see a lot, and even for myself, is how do you identify the calling? How do you said if they're called or when they feel they're called to something, but how do you know what you're feeling is the calling versus just a voice to try to do this? How do you know you're actually living your calling?
So I believe we're all called. I think that some of us recognize that we're called. And when that happens, there's a deep wrestling, because we get calling and purpose often interlinked and intertwined. And this is a conversation that I have often because I wouldn't say that it's unique, but I would say that it's contrary to popular opinion. that the idea of purpose and calling isn't something that you find. I believe that that's a really great marketing tactic that has been perpetuated by personal development and the modern church. And it's been made into several books, courses, frameworks, and all these things that you discover. Your calling is to be you, whatever that looks like. Now, again, I have the frame of being a believer and being a Christian. So my bend is that that means that our unique position is to bring all of what we have into the conversation of how do we glorify God. So if that means that I'm in front of my kids, that means I'm in front of you. If that's as simple as holding the door open for somebody, being generous with my time or with my resources, right? That's all part of my purpose. It's in much in anything as it is in everything. The hard part about tying purpose to a person or a calling to a person is what happens if something happens to that person. The hard part about tying a purpose or a calling to a profession or a vocation is what happens if, God forbid, something strikes you or something happens that you're unable to fulfill on that thing that you feel is your calling or purpose. Are you now not called? Are you now not purposeful? So I find that purpose is more the conversation and calling is more the conversation of how do we align the giftings, because we all have unique things about us. So how do we align our giftings, things that we naturally take for granted, the things that we think everybody could probably do this, but not everyone can. So you have skills, you have giftings, you have talents. You then also have passion. And you have things that keep you up at night. You have things that drive you forward with a certain propensity and with a certain passion. And then on the other side of that, you have ways in which you contribute to the world. So the ways in which you give, the ways in which you create a living, the ways in which you earn income. So where those all collide is a sweet spot. And so when we have passion, this is known as ikigai. So you have passion, you have talent, and then you have that positioning into marketplace. And so when those three collide, that's often what we refer to as what we would assume to be our calling. But I find that so many times, again, those are often very spiritual words because we contextualize it towards the conversation of being called to something more. I think oftentimes we want it to mean something very, very specific because for people like us, and this won't make sense to most people, but for people like us, when you're good at a lot of things and when a lot of things maybe come naturally to you and your 60% is maybe somebody else's 120% and you get by on good enough, it's like you almost want that very straight line. No, this is what the thing is, because when you're good at a lot of things, well, I don't want to mess up.
Hmm.
And when you've been raised with the conversation that you have a lot of potential on your life, or you have a high calling on your life, or in my case, God's going to do big things in your life, you don't want to mess that up. And as a kid, it puts a weird frame in your head, like, I can't get this wrong. And then you read all the books and you recognize, okay, but I'm still good at a lot of things and I still like a lot of things. So I find that so many times we find what we're passionate about, we find what we're good at, and then we ask God to bless it as if it were our calling. And I think that it's much less about what we do and much more about who we become in the process. Purpose is developed over time. Purpose is cultivated. It's seasoned through experience, through loss, through trial, through success, through failure, through all of the happenstances of life.
Like I resonate with that so much because I remember growing up, it was like, oh, Jason he has so much potential. Oh, he's gonna go far. He has so much potential. And we say that, and I look back in my life and I realize that was more almost like a damn curse on me
Yeah.
not so many times because I every time I felt lost or I didn't know what the next move was, and I watched my friends all know exactly they want to be doctors and lawyers, and I didn't fit into that box. I just kept hearing, "Oh, Jason has so much potential." I'm like, "Man, am I not living up to it? Am I broken? Is something wrong? Is this where I tap out? Were they all wrong? Did they set me up for failure to believe all this?" And you start going through that. So I mean, that hits so hard.
Well, the interesting thing about calling is If you lack the clarity and you put a lot of pressure on yourself as if your purpose was an expectation to live up to rather than a promise that you get to live from,
Mm.
then that calling can almost feel like a curse, right? And it can stalemate you. And you find yourself in a position of never making a move fully because you always want to keep the options open. And the problem is inside of that conversation, then you continue to quote unquote wait on God when He's given you all of the talents and resources necessary to be able to move forward with clarity. And He'll meet you on the other side of that. Always. There's never been a season in my life where He hasn't. And certainly, if you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be doing this today, this didn't exist to me, right? Like our tagline is helping good men become great and helping great men create movements.
Love it.
And we can do that inside of the conversation of our home, our family, our own spiritual and personal life, certainly in our business lives as well. But this started as a teenager who was the guy who everybody came to talk to. This started as a 19-year-old who was wet behind the ears and went into full-time occupational ministry. This has been seasoned over my entire life. And the calling for me is so long as I can see God in it, I will step toward it. The calling is I want to set a standard that exemplifies the statement that I say to my son that you can be and do anything that you want in this world. I want to live that out. I want to set the standard for that. I don't want him to have an expectation to live up to. I want him to see the promise that he gets to live from.
But that comes from a place of like you have to have deep inner confidence in yourself in order to take that step. Which
Sure.
I feel is one of the biggest holdbacks for a lot of entrepreneurs is they in their domain, they're great. Like you put them up and they may feel confident, they may feel they're the best, but a lot of entrepreneurs I feel struggle with that imposter syndrome, which then leads to that insecurity and they don't have that confidence to walk fully into their calling or into their passion. Have you seen that too? And how do you remedy that?
We are an impatient people.
Hmm.
We live in a society and a culture where everything is 2 days away, sometimes overnighted. I can I can get my food door dashed. I can do anything. Like everything is instantaneous. We have everything at our immediate disposal, except the results and the seasoned experience that we're looking for. And I like to put it this way. So a lot of times you'll find entrepreneurs, founders, anyone who's in the growth process of going from where they see themselves from where they currently are, find themselves in a bit of a valley. We could just call it a valley for object lesson's sake. And again, being that I was a ministry for selling, everything's an object lesson. So if you think of a valley only exists between two mountains. That's why it's called a valley. And what we find is we climb the first precipice. We climb the first mountain, which is finding our calling and leaning into a certain set of ideas and frames and passions that we resonate with. But then there's the commissioning, which is the sending out, which is the actual doing of the thing. Then there's a gap. There's a gap between where I'm at and where I see that I'm being called to. And there's this imposter syndrome gap. And I'd have you consider that in between these peaks, in between the peak of calling and in between the peak of commissioning, is the seasoning of character. And in that seasoning of character, it is my belief that it's not that you can't handle the front side of what you see. It's the backside that will take you out. Everybody wants the front side of the blessing, but the backside of that blessing will take you out if you're not ready for it. And so we all want more influence. Okay. Well, with more influence comes more scrutiny, right? We all want a bigger company, but with a bigger company, you're going to have to season your leadership. You're going to have to make better choices. We all want the bigger house. We want the better car. Okay. Well, with that comes higher expenses. We all want more notoriety. Well, with that comes the backside of more criticism and more hate. And so I find so many times that our character is underdeveloped for the next mountain in the commission that we're called to climb. And so if you find yourself in that season, it's not that you're not called to it. It is an understanding and a patience to recognize that in this season, there's a working out of the character so that you're ready for all the things that come with it. It's the conversation that we have, which is on my wall right now, which is what needs to die in me to become the man that I said that I would be, right? I want to build this big thing. Great. Well, who you are now could not sustain or handle the growth that would be required. You don't have the skill sets. You don't have the mindset. You don't have the team. You don't have any of the infrastructure that would be necessary. But what you do have is one step forward. And so if we can break this down and we can put one foot in front of the other, and we can start to develop confidence through those small wins, because confidence is nothing more than keeping your word to yourself and doing incrementally harder things every day. Certainty is built on the backside of that confidence, driven towards a particular calling or purpose. So we continue to build those reps. And when we build those reps, we build our capacity. And when we build our capacity, that margin increases in what we're able to not only take on as a leader, but what we're able to then delegate, because we have cultivated that leadership mentality versus just a management and founder syndrome of I need to control everything, right? Some of you want to build big things, but you control too much right now. You wouldn't be able to let go of it.
And I think some people think they want to build big things, but aren't prepared it goes back to what you were saying about wants.
Right. Why do you want it? Like,
Why do you want it, and do you even
Mhm.
want it? Because we all have mimetic desires, right? We see
Right.
Cody on social media. We see Gary Vaynerchuk on social media, and we're like, man, I want to be Gary. Do you? Are you willing to pay the price Gary paid to get to where he's at? Would you?
Absolutely.
You want to be
Right.
on the road that long? Do you want to be away from your family? So, because I speak to entrepreneurs who are like, yeah, I want to do this, this, this. I want to speak. I want to be on the road 250 days a year speaking. And then their next thing is, and then I want a family where I'm home to put my kids to bed every single night. And I'm like, but you just said you're gone 250 days. So
Right.
you're wondering why you're stuck. You have a conflicting view. So your wants don't even align. And then how do you even have confidence to move forward when you're not even sure what you even want? Every step
Right.
is an insecure step because
Yeah.
you're not even sure what you even want.
Yeah. It's very important to get clear on what you want. Because if not, when we talk about these mountains, proverbially, you'll end up climbing somebody's mountain and it's never going to feel like success or fulfillment because it was never yours to climb in the first place. And there's some of us, you, myself, probably all that are listening, it's not even about reaching the top of a mountain. Like we just enjoy climbing.
Hmm.
And we enjoy the building of things. And when that's the case, well, now there's not a sprint to reach any proverbial milestone that is quantified by somebody else's success. I'm going to climb because I like to climb. And I'm going to do it at the pace and at the rate that makes sense to me within the boundaries that I've set that confirm who it is that I say that I am. There are certain things that are easy no's for me because they conflict with my family schedule. I don't miss events for the kids. I don't miss important events with my wife. I said no to every speaking engagement for the past quarter because there was a season where I needed to step back and I needed to really focus on the endeavors that God had placed in front of me in terms of the leadership of certain companies that we had developed. And being gone 3 to 4 days at a time, consistently every other week, sounds fun on paper. But if we're not careful, we think that that's the miracle because it feels massive and it looks cool.
Hmm.
I would also have you consider that we often miss the miraculous because it's masked as mundane. The miraculous
Go
for me
deeper
is
on
that,
that. I think you need to go a bit deeper on that. I hear what you're saying. But I think that needs to be really dug into a little bit.
I got healthy kids, man. I got a healthy wife. I got a son that every day at 9 years old grabs my hand. Got a son that when I show up to pick him up from school, he runs and jumps in my arms. There will be a last day for that. I have no idea when that is. I have no idea when the last day he's going to say, Dad, will you scratch my head while I fall asleep?
Hmm.
I have no idea. And that's the miracle. I wanted to be a dad my whole life. And if you're not careful, you can sacrifice what it is that you love the most for the idea of what it is that you think that you want. And I hear all the time, well, I'm doing this for my family. You don't understand. Like, I'm doing this so that they can have all the things that I never had. Well, my consideration to you is you didn't actually have what you really wanted. Because if you're telling me that, then what you're telling me is that money was scarce. So your parents were always working and there was never enough. So now you're working really hard and you have enough, but you're still missing what you had, which is active, loving, present parents. You just have more stuff. What does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul in the process? The fact that I'm healthy, the fact that I'm able to create a schedule that works for me, that allows me to show up fully for not only the interests of how I pursue what I feel is my calling, but the greatest calling that I have, which is to my family and to God. There's always people that you can look to that seem to have all the things that you think that you want. I would have you consider that a reframe would be not what you don't have, but starting to be grateful for what you do have and for the things that we often take for granted. And from that abundance, create, but create from a position of cultivating boundaries in your life. So you protect that which is most precious to you because you only get it for as long as you get it. In Ecclesiastes, we hear that the wisdom teacher Kohelet speaks of Havel, which is vapor, smoke, that everything in this life for the most part is meaningless. And there are seasons for everything. And if everything is meaningless, then the consideration is that we get to assign that which has meaning and to enjoy it for as long as we've got it because we're only here for a breath of life and to not take it for granted. I've buried too many people in my life. I've put people in the ground that I love dearly, family members, friends, infants, elderly. I don't take for granted breath that they never breathe again. I don't take for granted that I have a body that works, so I want to respect it well. I'm grateful that I get the chance to train and to work out and to set the example of physical health for my son because I'm able to. And if you are able to and you don't, why would you disrespect the one vessel that God gave you to occupy this life in? Why would you not treat it with the utmost respect? God's given you a partner and a wife or a husband. How is it that we don't cherish them with everything that we have? He's given you kids, healthy kids, kids that can walk and run and can think and can write and can dream and can do, that love you unconditionally, who could never ask you to build a big company, never asked you to step away, never asked you to do all the things that you're supposedly called to. I'm not saying that you should feel guilty about those things. I just think it's something that we need to reconcile and we need to create margin and boundary around as much as possible so that we don't end up getting to the point where 18 years later we have an empty house with no memories.
I speak about this all the time. I think business owners want to build something and sacrifice what they have now in hopes that one day they enjoy it down the road. My philosophy is build the business around the life you want, not the life you want around the business, because then it will never work. And
Yeah.
you don't have to sacrifice the things that matter most. If you have it right now, enjoy it now. There's no guarantees on a later, right? There's no guarantees on a later.
No. Well, and this is why I don't go to, like, I never go to bed angry. This is why every single day I tell the people that I love, and I'm grateful for them. You never know. The arrogant assumption that we're going to get another day, procrastinating, like the assumption that God owes you another day to do the things that he's called you to today.
Well, it's funny because I put my 5-year-old to bed. So I have a 5-year-old and 3-year-old and a 3-month-old now.
Mhm.
And I put the 5-year-old to bed and he was like, one more story, and just wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, last one. Don't make me upset. All right. Now I'm upset. This is the last one. Good night. And I'm like, good night. I love you. Good night. And I walked out. And as I'm going down the stairs, I'm like, just something. I can't say like this, what if this is my last time I ever talked to him? What if this was his last time? Just something made me step up, go back into his room, and I'm like, you know how much I love you? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I love you so much. And I give him
Hmm.
I'm like, so proud of you. You had a great day today. I love you. And I closed the door and I walked out. I'm like, that feels so much better.
Bro, I go through the exact same thing. And my son at 9 years old does the same thing. Can you tell me one more story, buddy? This okay, but then you're going to bed, and then it's something else, then it's something else, and this is interesting consideration around one. We have to set boundaries. You need to go to bed, but
Yeah.
two, also recognizing the not in saying no, but in shutting down that opportunity, which eventually you have to do. And he's gotten better about like this last one. Okay, Dad, cool.
But it's
Uh,
also like what age
when
do
is
you
the
stop
when does he
asking
not
for a
ask
story?
anymore?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you're like,
Yeah,
man, I wish I told you 10 more stories.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
always
These are
have that, you always have like that
it's
friction,
it's
like I can sit
attention,
here all night, but that's not good for you because you need to
right?
go.
One of the things that I found is useful, just a little hack, is if I scratch his back and scratch his head while I'm telling him the story, he typically falls asleep.
The back scratch. If
Yeah,
you're
man,
a
it just
parent and you're
it.
not doing the back scratch, like, and now he picks my arm up and puts it on his
Oh
back.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like he just
yeah,
turns around, lifts up his shirt and says, tell me a story.
dude. Stetson like he'll go into like a cocoon, so like he cocoons himself in
Yeah.
his blanket, and then he pokes his head out. He's like, "All right, let's go."
It's amazing. Um, the why is important. The vision is important, right? Because if we, I always relate to like the Alice in Wonderland, right? When Alice asked the cat, for direction, the cat says like it was like, which way do you want to go? And Alice is like, I don't know. And cat's like, it doesn't really matter which way you go then.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs have that. They've managed to build or get to a certain level and they manage to whatever it is, even if they feel had success, but they don't go to the next step because they don't know exactly what they want. They don't know what they're building. So I want to take you into a tactical, so we could give tactical
Sure,
advice and
please.
practical advice for the listeners. What's your framework about how do you sit and figure out what are you meant to do? How do you figure out, how do you learn to sit with your vision? Because that's the hardest part. And I know for me personally, and I know from the clients I have, that actually sitting down and thinking about it, you'll find a million things to do,
Mhm.
then actually think about what you want because it's actually one of the hardest things. So what's your process?
Well, I mean, first it's discerning what is an approachable vision at this point in time. I think it's very easy to create and to future cast something that is absolutely massive, but it's so ethereal that it just doesn't make like you don't know what that conversation looks like. Like I want to build a multi-million dollar business. Do you? Are you sure? Do you know what that requires? Do you like I want to be a millionaire? You don't even know what do you mean? Like
Know
people put that
why
on their
and what you're
vision,
willing to pay
put on
to
their
get
vision
there?
board. I'm like, you don't even know what that feels like. Like, what are you talking? You just want the stuff. Like you have no idea what that entails. So let's not pull back all of your hopes and dreams. I get it. I understand. But there's no way for you to wrap your head around where concise steps will take you and properly directed steps. So first it is, so what do you want? Great. What is the modality that you're going to utilize to get there? So what is the company? What is the business that we're building? Right. We started 4 new startups this year and all are doing very, very well. But we were very, very clear about what we were building, very clear about who we were serving, very tactical about what those first 5 to 10 steps were and then creating the margin to hire effectively as quickly as possible. So it's distilling what it's going to require. And if you don't know, this is why mentorship, coaching, masterminds, all the things are important because you just don't know what you don't know. And a lot of us will spend time being busy because we equate busy with business because our parents were always overwhelmed and busy. And I'd have you consider that busy isn't effective, it's just manic. And so how do we be effective? What are the OKRs? How do we measure that against specific KPIs, key performance indicators for those of you that may not be familiar with some jargon? Like how do we set appropriate indicators to let us know that we're on the right track. What can we measure? So if I'm starting anything, well, we have to have a proof of concept. We have to be able to then find a buyer. We then have to sell it to that buyer. We then have to validate the offer through the client experience. Then we refine the offer, and then we grow the offer after we iterate if necessary. And we do that in really all the lanes of business. If you're not familiar with kind of the different buckets, a book I would recommend would be Traction by Gino Wickman. Kind of gives you the foundation, the fundamentals of how to structure and organize a business from there as it grows. I'd recommend a book called High Output Management by Andrew Grove. Phenomenal read on how to build infrastructure and teams. Um, it's not a simple one size fits all because, again, I think we all have a different idea and view of what business is. You're building a coaching business. Well, that's very different than building a SaaS company,
Yep.
right? It's very different than building a private fund. It's very different than building a conversation in real estate investment, and that's how you want to build your capital and your income. All of these are very, very different metrics. All of these require a different set of skills. All these require a different set of employees driven by a different set of metrics. So getting clear on what you want to build first, setting proper, lofty, but proper expectations, and then finding out what are the levers that actually move things forward. What are your key drivers? What actually gets you attention? What then actually creates leads? What then actually closes sales? Like, that's step one. From there, if it's not necessarily what you thought it was going to be, guess what? You can reiterate. You can consistently pivot in small ways in order to get the desired outcome or in order to do the thing that you find to be most fulfilling. Where I started in 2017 is radically different than where I'm at today. Where I started in 2017 was making posts on Facebook about the journey that I had experienced in ministry and some of the questions that I had and the ways that I had walked with people that resonated. And people started asking me if I would walk with them spiritually. Well, then on the backside of that, I started to walk with a lot of, entrepreneurs, and I started to recognize that their marketing and their language and their articulation was trash. No offense, you just hadn't had any proper training in how to articulate eloquently and persuasively what it is that you were trying to accomplish. Like, I was a pastor for almost 15 years. If you can sell salvation, you can sell anything, right? And with conviction and with belief. And there's a way that I've been seasoned over 20 years to stand in front of people and to communicate a message with empathy, but also with conviction and clarity and with simplicity. So I started to recognize that I'd been building teams for 15 years across the country in a multitude of churches. All of this translated into higher level leadership, into how to develop and cultivate leaders, because I've been doing it for so long. Like all of the things in which you may take for granted, all the ways that you've been seasoned over these years can play a role into what it is that you're building that you may not even see right now. Because the vision is, you've created a vision so big based on what Alex Hormozy's doing,
Yeah.
right? Like, cool, but let's also be realistic with where we're at today.
How much emphasis do you put on like knowing your future self? Like what Ben Hardy talks about this a lot. I don't know if you know Ben Hardy, the author, but he talks about
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
I love everything that he has written.
yeah. How much
And Dan Sullivan, the two
yeah,
are kind
exactly.
of
Yeah, the gap in the game
like
exactly.
interconnected.
How much emphasis do you put on really crystal clear visualizing who you are in the future and having that kind of dictate a lot of what you do?
So My future self, I can only future cast for so long. And I can say that with confidence because every decade, so I'll be 40 in like 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. Every decade is so radically different. And every decade looks nothing like what I thought it would. And the ascension of how I lead, but also the humility with which I've cultivated after spending so much time with people who are just so much further along than me. It creates a unique proposition that like I'm not going to do 20 years from now. Who do I need to become 5 years from now? If what we're building today does what we think it's going to do, who is that person? So this is part of the reason that I took a step back over the last quarter was because I recognized that our companies were growing at a rate that it wasn't that it was outpacing my ability to lead. It was just that speaking was contradicting the time that I needed to be able to focus directly. And so it's not that I mean, sometimes you got to recognize that God will call you out of a thing for a season because you need to focus on seasoning your skill sets for what he's preparing you for, right? There's that character development in between calling and the commission. So I recognize that the rate
Preparation,
at
we
which
call it.
I'm sorry.
Preparation.
Right. Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Yep.
So as I'm taking a step back because I recognize there's a lot of study that I need to do. There is mentorship that I needed to receive for myself as I'm now stepping into a role that is amplified over a number of startups, let alone the companies that I'm already a part of and I've already established. And my ability to effectively lead from 30,000 feet without having to get deep into the weeds of the everyday and micromanage, while also maintaining the margin, the boundary, the version of me today can't handle what happens 5 years from now. I'm not equipped for it yet, but I recognize the holes that are in the matrix right now because of seasoned mentors that I have in my life who have been where I'm going and can sprinkle their wisdom and discernment into some of my deficiencies right now. And a lot of times we look at that and we feel bad about that, or we think less of ourselves like, oh, I'm not this person yet. Well, of course you're not. But the only way that you get to her is to recognize and to have the humility to say, you know what, I'm not that person. What do I need to learn? What do I need to unlearn? Who do I need to be surrounded by? Who do I need in my corner as a mentor? Because you have to qualify the criticism. Who do I need to remove from the circle for a season? Because sometimes walking in love is walking in distance. And if it's not that I don't love you, it's just that if I'm going this direction, this doesn't make sense right now. And so it is taking a very clear view of what you don't know, and then having objective accountability to expose what you don't know that you don't know.
Hmm. You touched on coaching. How
Yeah.
important is coaching for you? And what would your response be for the listeners who are like, yeah, I don't really need it. I just need someone who's going to do it for me. I don't need the coaching on how to do it. I already know what to do. I just need the people who are just going to go do the work.
You must have an indispensable amount of resources at your disposal to never need to, like, basically, you're just building businesses in a box that you have no affiliation to, but just own. Good. Wow. That must be a really interesting position to take. I'm not there. So kudos to you. Give me a call. I'd love to pick your brain on some things and to consider you a resource.
I'll hire you as a coach.
Coaching,
Yeah,
coaching
you'll
is
coach
important.
me.
Yeah, yeah. You coach me on how to not do anything. I'm just not wired that way.
Yeah.
Coaching is important because for people like us who are in charge of their own game, there is no accountability. Certainly, you might be accountable to your employees if you're to that position yet, to where you have substantiated the revenue that is necessary to hire. So there's a responsibility there. but there's no one that you're directly reporting to. There's no one that is helping you push past the propensity of your desire to stay where you're at, because that's what the brain does. There's no one to push you to that edge of what's possible for you. And for some, like you don't even see what that next step might be. So you find yourself in a perpetual cycle of circling the same mountain for 40 years when it should have been an 11-day trip. I was tying my son's wrestling shoes on Monday evening. Oh, sorry, Sunday afternoon. We were at a private lesson with his coach. And he looked at me and said, Dad, I was like, buddy, he said, when do I not need a coach anymore? He's like, is it like 15th grade? I'm like, you mean college? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, your coach, what does his dad do? Coaches wrestling in college. Right. And he's done it for like 20 years over that. So all of these athletics in college, they still have coaches? Yeah. Would you assume they're probably pretty good because they make it onto the college team? Yeah. So why would they need coaches still? I guess to push them like my coach pushes me. Yeah. Is that why you have coaches, Dad? It is. When will you not have coaches? I said, son, this weekend you're with your mom and my wife is taking a trip up to see her brother. So I have the house to myself. And I will be in a weekend long intensive with one of my coaches. I hired a speaking coach. Why? You've been speaking forever. Yeah. But there's something God is doing in me right now and cultivating a new message, because one of my mentors, Owen McManus, says that there's something about storytelling that gets stale. And when you find yourself in that stale season, it's time to start story living.
Mm.
So, son, it's time for me to tell a new story, evolve from where I've been over the past couple of years and what God has done and the ways in which he's seasoned my leadership and the ways in which he's seasoned the endeavors of my soul and the content of my character. And I'm bringing someone in to help me curate what that could look like, who's done it far more than me and on far bigger platforms. So will you ever not have coaches? Son, I will always have coaches and mentors because there's always room to grow. It may not be in the conversation of business, but spiritually, I will always have mentors. Relationally, I will always have mentors. I will always need someone to reflect back to me not only who I can become, but also in the moment who I really am, so that I'm not lying to myself. Because you can be completely honest with yourself and still not be telling the truth. And the importance about having a mirror held up to you is to show you who you can become, but also to show you as well what needs to die inside of you, personally, professionally, to become that version of you that is going to be required to cultivate the calling that is inside of you and to be commissioned out to go do bigger, broader, better, more impactful things. I consider it like the man with talent scripturally who gives talents away to his workers. And if I am not as responsible as possible with what I've been given, if I am disrespectful with the gifts that I've been given, even if I'm just lazy with them, and that's what I found was happening with speaking was I can wing it. And because I've been doing it for so long, I still crush, but that's not being responsible. That's resting on my talent and that's resting on charisma. And that's when things start to become dangerous because you stop leaning into the edge of what could be potential and possible. And I don't want that to be given to someone else. So I need to steward it as effectively as possible. And I just use that to say, like, perhaps I'm in a further season than some of you that are watching or listening. And this is a conversation that is still so relevant to me and why I continue to invest as much as I do inside of the conversation of who I'm becoming, because there are blind spots that I can't see. There are roads that I have not traveled down. And there are people who are far more seasoned than me, not just financially, but spiritually and mentally and relationally, that I want that seasoned wisdom inside of my life so that I can avoid some of the pitfalls and that I can collapse the conversation of calling quicker than I could by myself.
There's a saying that that it's what you don't see in your business that's costing you the most money.
Sure. Yeah. And that's ego.
Yeah.
I got asked yesterday why so many men and women fail in the conversation of business. And it always comes back to ego because ego isn't open to suggestion. Ego isn't open to the pain of confrontation. Ego isn't open to the conversation of you not being right because ego is too busy always trying to prove itself right.
So let's talk about that because I do
Sure.
think confidence and a certain amount of ego is a necessity, in my opinion, to kind of make it to certain levels. There's
Mhm.
arrogance, which I don't know how that I think is different than ego.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a pendulum.
Yeah. How do you play those two things into success?
So I think that the older you get, at least it's been my experience, the less ego that you cultivate if you're doing it right. And the more confidence you build, but that confidence is built in seasoned expertise and also in empathy because you live enough life and you recognize that again, Ecclesiastes, we're going back to the dirt. And for the most part, all of this is completely meaningless. That's not to be nihilistic about things, but we have to put things in proper perspective. And so ego thinks it's invincible. And I think maturity recognizes that you are very much finite. Confidence is something else. Confidence is your ability to keep your word to yourself. Confidence is a surety in who it is that you are and who it is that you belong to and to what you're called to. And that's just built, again, on repetition and leaning into the lessons of failure, not as an assignment of identity, but as an opportunity to grow. Right? Arrogance is something different. Arrogance is ego. Arrogance is a projection. It's a false sense. It's a false projection of confidence. But it's inconsistency and fear and insecurity with a mask on.
Hmm. Love that.
And you typically find this, in the human experience, we go through modalities of maturity and things that we seek in this life. When you're a kid, it's all about things. You don't really know any different. All you want is stuff. I just want the thing. I want the car. I want the toy. I want the bike. I want the video game, whatever it might be. And you get into your teens and into your 20s and you move to experiences. I want to get the degree. I want to fall in love. I want to do the deed, if you know what I mean. I want to do all these things. I want to get the good job. I want to be promoted. Like it's all about the experience of the thing. And then as you move into what Richard Rohr would have you consider to be like the second half of life, in his book Falling Upward, it would be that you move in towards to people actually being the true meaning, relationships. Nothing is richer than relationships. And when you're focused on relationships, ego doesn't really have a place there because you recognize that everybody is walking towards their own unique calling, or they're avoiding the propensity of their traumas, or they're projecting in some way. And it's very easy to spot the more you get in tune with who you are and you recognize how futile most of these battles. So many times we want to fight battles of no eternal consequence to prove things to people that don't really care in the first place.
Yep.
This is why online you find that so many market to the things because so many we find that you've heard of the phrase like adult children. So many have not gone out of the phase of wanting to collect things and experiences, which is why most marketing tends to drive towards fancy cars, big houses, fast cash, all the flash, all the girls, all the trips, all the planes, all the beaches, all the oceans, all the things. I've found that my sweet spot is working with those who recognize that those things are cool, but they don't mean anything if you go back to an empty house. And you can collect all the things in the world, but if you don't have anyone that you love to share them with, it's going to be a very, very empty life. And you're going to find yourself consistently trying to fill that dopamine gap with more and more stuff when what you're really wanting is oxytocin and that deep love connection. And so
Well,
confident.
it goes back to like what you were saying, right? Like who am I?
Mhm.
What in me needs to die? And I think one of the brilliant questions I've heard you ask before is, in order for me to become that person, how do I approach today?
Yeah. So
I
then
think
we
those
put
three questions are just like I think they sound really like, yeah, it's nice to
basic.
think about, but when you sit with those three questions, those are hard hitting questions.
If you sit down and you journal what needs to die in me today, it will be radically confronting. And then on the backside of that, okay, well, if these things need to die, well, then in order for me to accomplish the things that I'm set out to accomplish, in order for me to fulfill what it is that I feel that I'm called to, and remember, calling is all encompassing. A loving present father, a loving present providing, protecting, leading husband, a sufficient and excellent leader of people. Well, then an athlete, I'm an athlete. What do I need to do on a daily basis to confirm that? You want to build confidence in your life? Build out a routine. I don't have this magic morning formula for you. Sorry, I'm not Hell Elrod. But you need to build out a routine and a structure for yourself that confirms that identity
And keep it.
and keep it. Yeah. Build the habit infrastructure. This is why one of our key phrases is this is who I am. So this is what I do. Most goals are arbitrary. You want to lose 20 pounds? Great. You can do that a number of different ways. You can work out for a season. You can go get on Ozempic. There's a whole host of ways that you can lose a lot of weight really fast. The problem is on the backside of that, if you didn't develop your identity, you're going to gain it back.
Mm.
So the conversation now is, no, I'm just an athlete. So I only eat certain things and I train every day because that's who I am and that's what I do. And so the weight will eventually fall off, great, but then you maintain it because you've already built the identity confirmation on the backside of it. Same is true if you want to be a CEO. Well, do you know what a CEO does? Do you know how a CEO operates outside of a fancy title on, Instagram for their business of two VAs,
Yeah.
right? Like,
I'll never forget. I sat down with Gary Vaynerchuk and I was like, if you have to build, like, I want to build an agency because I have a consulting business and we have a paid marketing agency.
yeah, same.
When I was starting the agency, I'm like, Gary, if I want to build VaynerMedia, how would I do it? How would you do it for today? Start from scratch.
Yeah.
He goes, I wouldn't. So
Mhm.
I said, what do you mean? He goes, dude, you love the strategy, you love all this, you love all that. Do you know what my job is? My job is Susie doesn't get along with Steven, and they're on the same account. So how do I separate them? Bill brings tuna into the office and it stinks up the office, so there's complaints about him. He goes, that's not strategy anymore. Now I'm a fireman and a police officer.
Yeah,
He goes, that's what I did. I didn't sign up for that. I'm just golden handcuffed now because I grew it too big. But my goal was to be visionary, to do the strategy. And guess what? In order to grow past that, it can't be me doing it all the time. So it grew. And if that's what you want to do, then I think, do you really want to build VaynerMedia?
sure. Well, and it's also protecting the integrity of what it is that you set out to identify in yourself as your giftings and leanings, because it's very easy to get sucked into different roles that we never signed up for if we don't protect them efficiently.
Mm,
And so, making sure that we hire effectively and that we position our company or our business in a way that grows alongside the trajectory that we have set for it. So it's doing the things every day. There are certain parameters and frameworks that I utilize on a daily basis, certain things that I say to my family every single day to confirm who it is that I say that I am as a husband, as a dad, right? I have fresh flowers every week in this house for my wife. She enjoys it, but really more than that, it's to show the boys what a standard is,
mm.
right?
It's
I
like the
got
whole, it's like the whole like date your daughter thing.
It's the same thing. I've got a dry erase marker. I write on our mirror, on her mirror every morning in the bathroom, just a quick love note. Just to remind her, is she an acts of service? Not necessarily. She's more of a quality time. Uh, but it confirms, hey, I see you and I love you and I appreciate the ways in which you champion me. And who is it that you want to be and what will that require on a daily basis?
And who in you needs to die to become that person?
And every day, it's a conversation of daily death. Everybody wants to talk
I
about the
actually think it's a great
resurrection.
way to journal. I journal a lot, and it's
Mhm.
a lot freestyle now because I'm able to do it every day. But if you're starting
Yeah,
off, I would start with those three questions every single day. Just start blank canvas, three questions.
yeah,
So every single day, and there's your template. If journaling is hard for you, I'd probably start with those three questions every single day as a framework.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
great. Look, we'll wrap up with a couple more questions.
sure.
Well, one of the last ones I'm going to ask you is embrace the lion.
Yeah,
Talk to us about what that means.
yeah. So it originally was embrace the Lion of the tribe of Judah. But I mean, dude, putting that as like an email URL,
And it's a big T-shirt, so
it's
it's a
dude, it's
very,
just a weak. So the original tagline. So I originally I moved into this conversation of mentorship and coaching because I had too many friends in ministry and business that were taking their own lives.
Mm.
Right? So male suicide is a very real issue in the world, and certainly in this country. 76% of suicides are men, second leading cause of death, 18 to 35. And so it's an epidemic, and I've buried too many people. So the original tagline was helping good men take guns out of their mouths, but that was super weird on a shirt. So we had to evolve the tagline
I
from
don't mean
there.
to laugh, but it's funny. Yeah.
Dude, I was at the first conference that I ever went to. I was completely green. I didn't even have an LLC. I had nothing. And I go to this entrepreneurial conference because I was asked to, and I ended up having a conversation with Tom Bilyeu, who I didn't know at the time, and a solid guy. I was just backstage, and we were jamming out. And he's like, "So what do you do?" I'm like, "I help good men take guns out of their mouths." And he's like, "Bro, that's pretty heavy. Do you lead with that?" Like, and this is the first time I'd been asked. And he's like, that's heavy. You might want to shift that. And so it was short-lived.
Yeah.
Embrace the Lion is daily answering the question of what needs to die in me to become the man that I said that I would be. And it was a process that I developed for myself in four main tenets: head, heart, health, and habits. So head, how you treat your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings; your heart, how you treat your relationships; your health, how you treat your body; and then habits, how you treat your time and how you respect it accordingly to the vision that God has laid in your heart for who it is that you're called to become. And every day we answer the same series of questions, and we confirm that question by the actions of our identity. So we help men build better bodies. We help men build better relationships. We help men build healthy, resilient, strong kids. We help men build strong, resilient companies. Uh, we help men become the men of God that they're called to be, the protectors, the providers, and the leaders that I believe that we're all called to be. And it has evolved over the course of years. And we have a mastermind that we run called Roundtable. And then I do offer a few one-to-one consultations on a yearly basis. At this point, with the number of endeavors that I have internally inside of our holding company, our portfolio, it's fairly minimal now. And I'm grateful for the season that I'm in, that I really don't have to rely on any front-facing marketing, and I don't need to sell myself or really sell anything at this point. Our mastermind is simply because I just want to help more men.
Mm.
Um, but that's it, man. It was recognizing that far too many men operate in a castrated state, and where we live in a society and a culture where being a man is demonized in a lot of ways, specifically in the ways in which I believe it is to be a man from a biblical perspective. And so, how do we answer that call? And certainly, it's not for everyone. And certainly, it is not to condemn anyone, but it is to say, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is how we align. This is what we're committed to every single day. Very, very high accountability. We're talking day in, day out, check ins and checkouts. We're talking, you jump into our conversation, you're working out every day, you're getting shipped a heart monitor, you're getting everything tracked on a daily basis. We have weekly targets, we have 2 calls a week. You have a monthly coach with an accountability coach. You're assigned a partner. Like it's very high account. We do not leave anything to wonder
Amazing.
outside of the Holy Spirit.
I'll let you go. One final question, and then I'll let you plug yourself and let the listeners know where to find you, because I'm sure people are going to want to follow you up to this, because this was incredible. You talked about your tagline is make men. What was the tagline again?
Yeah. Helping good men to become great and great men to create movements.
What's the difference between a group and a movement?
Mm. A group is just an assembly of people. A movement has soul. Because if you change a man, you change the trajectory of his family. If you change his family, you change the trajectory of his neighborhood. And if you change his neighborhood, you change his school. You change that school and then that neighborhood, you then change the community. You change the community, you can change the city. You change the city, you can change the state. You change the state, you can change the country. You can change the country, then you change the world. And we're doing that one man at a time. A group is just an assembly of people. I can get a group of people together for anything. A movement has legs. A movement has heart. A movement has purpose, intention, and soul behind it.
Love it. For the listeners who want to reach out, how can they find you, Cody?
I'm CodyJefferson.com, but for all intents and purposes, I would say like the fastest way to get a hold of me will probably just shoot me a message on Instagram. Just it will probably go to my requests folder, just full transparency there. So just put this podcast at the top of it. That way I know where you're coming from. But I believe everybody has a powerful story, and I would love to hear yours. How can I serve you? How about I flip the question on you? How can I serve you
And
today?
I think you just did it. I think you did it for a little over an hour. I think you've already done that, my friend. I
Cool.
appreciate that question. But I think you just sharing your story, sharing your wisdom with myself and the listeners, man, that's some big serving. I don't want to be selfish and start asking for more stuff after something like that. That was just great.
Well, I'm grateful for the conversation. I'm grateful to call you a friend now, and I'm honored to walk alongside men like you in the conversation of what it means to go from good to great and what it means to equip others to live into their God-given potential. And so I want to say that I'm proud of what you're doing and I'm proud of who you are.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.